for joining the PIOJ quarterly press briefing. Thanks for your waiting. We'll start momentarily, but we'll go through what we expect from this meeting. We'll have the presentation, and afterwards, we'll have an open discussion. All participants will be asked to turn off your microphones and keep them off. At the point in time of discussion, you'll be invited to put your request to ask a question in the chat, and you'll be acknowledged. You'll open your mic and go ahead with your question. Thanks for the wait. We'll just delay 2 more minutes, and then we're ready to start as persons are joining as we gather. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the period April to June 2021. Joining Dr. Henry is Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Policy Logistics Division. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. As we get started, please allow me, on behalf of the Board of Management and staff of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, to express our deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues, former colleagues of the late Dr. Pauline Knight on her passing. She was a former colleague and acting Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica. And we pray for God's comfort and strength during this very difficult time of loss. As is customary, I would like to begin by reminding you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter based on early information available from the major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with trends in all economies globally, where it is the common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figures are released. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ strives to release the preliminary growth estimate approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, whereas Statin releases the official GDP figures 12 weeks following the end of the quarter. The release of the preliminary outturn information is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, and the government, to inform critical planning and policy-related decisions. Statin's data on GDP represents the official data on economic performance. Therefore, all preliminary estimates previously provided are updated to reflect the data provided by Statin. So, for example, for the preliminary estimate presented today, the actual data will be released by Statin at the end of September 2021, at which time the estimates being provided today will be updated. Before I provide the details of our latest estimate for the review quarter, let me first state the process. Now, the process is a very fluid one, as it relies on the latest available data at the time of the release. We are often asked why there are differences between the early estimates we release and the actual estimates provided by the Statistical Institute. Some of that divergence is explained by the fact that Statin's estimate is more comprehensive than the scope of the limited data collection and model forecasting and estimations undertaken by the PIOJ. A case in point is that up until just over a week ago, the PIOJ's estimation for the review quarter, as outlined at our last press briefing, was within the range of 7% to 9%, based on available data at that time. However, with the additional data received since then, the estimates have moved by several percentage points, as will be presented today. Today, we are reporting that real gross domestic product, GDP, for the Jamaican economy grew by an estimated 12.9% in the April to June 2021 quarter, compared with the corresponding quarter of 2020. The outturn for the April to June 2021 period largely reflected the impact of the relaxation of measures implemented to manage the COVID-19 pandemic relative to the corresponding quarter of 2020, when the country was partially locked down for the majority of the period. Measures implemented at that time included: 1, the closure of international borders to passenger movements, which curtailed external demand and essentially halted all tourist-related activities. 2, the implementation of curfews and targeted quarantine for COVID-19 hotspots, which restricted people movement and opening hours of businesses, as well as adversely impacted the demand for goods and services. And 3, the closure of all schools and the implementation of general stay-at-home and work-from-home orders, which further dampened the demand for some goods and services. Specifically, growth during the April to June 2021 period was spurred by: 1, increased domestic and external demand for Jamaica's goods and services, consequent on the relaxation of COVID-19 measures, due mainly to the increased rollout of vaccination efforts globally and approximately 5 billion doses administered to date. 2, increased operating hours for businesses, which facilitated higher capacity utilization rates and production levels. 3, an increase in the implementation of residential and commercial building projects and road construction works. 4, improved weather conditions, which facilitated growth in the agriculture and electricity and water supply industries. 5, higher levels of employment relative to the closure of businesses and layoffs caused by the lockdown in the corresponding quarter of 2020. And 6, higher levels of business confidence associated with the prospects for strengthened economic outturn in the short to medium term. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry expanded by an estimated 7.8%, with growth in all industries except mining and quarrying, which was negatively impacted by technical issues which affected alumina production, as well as shipping scheduling issues and lower demand, which impacted crude bauxite production. The improved performance largely reflected the impact of the partial recovery of most industries, following the relatively low levels of output recorded in the corresponding quarter of 2020, when the most restrictive COVID-19 management measures were implemented. Agriculture. Output for the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have grown by 10.3%. This outturn primarily reflected the impact of improved weather conditions and increased demand associated with the relaxation of measures to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly from related industries such as hotels and restaurants. Growth in industry was driven by other agricultural crops, which grew by 17.6%, reflecting higher production in 8 of the 9 crop groups. This performance was due to a rise in hectares reaped and output per hectare reaped. The most significant increases were recorded for potatoes, up 28.3%, vegetables up 27.8%, and condiments up 20.2%. Production of other tubers contracted by 2.5%. Traditional export crops, which grew by 9.2%, largely reflecting higher production of banana and plantains, up 17.6%, which outweighed estimated contractions recorded for sugarcane, coffee, and cocoa production, as well as animal farming, which was estimated to have grown by 4%, attributed to increased broiler meat and egg production. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry contracted by an estimated 12.3%. This was due to lower alumina and crude bauxite production. Alumina production declined by 11.3%, reflecting the impact of technical issues which affected the 2 refineries in operation. The alumina capacity utilization rate declined by 5.5 percentage points to 42.2%. Crude bauxite production contracted by 31.8% due to reduced demand from third-party customers. The bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased by 21.8 percentage points to 46.4%. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry is estimated to have grown by 3.1%, reflecting an uptick in both the food, beverages, and tobacco and other manufacturing components. The outturn largely reflected the impact of increased demand associated with a partial recovery from the downturn recorded in the corresponding quarter of 2020, when COVID-19 management measures restricted output in the industry. With respect to food, beverages, and tobacco, higher levels of output were recorded for edible oils, up 19.8%, edible fats, up 26.8%, poultry meat, up 4.8%, and beer and stout, up 50.5%. In the other manufacturing category, higher output stemmed from an estimated growth in both the chemical and chemical products and petroleum products categories. Increased petroleum production was recorded for gasoline, 7.4%, turbo fuel, 122.5%, and fuel oil, 7.5%. The increase in the chemical and chemical products category was due to fertilizer production, up 19.2%, salt, up 20.6%, and aluminum sulfate, up 44.3%. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry grew by an estimated 18.3%, reflecting higher levels of activities in both the building construction and other construction components. Total sales of construction input grew by 57% in real terms. The growth in the building construction component was due to increased residential and non-residential construction activities, reflecting an estimated increase in the total value of mortgages disbursed by 35.2% and the total number of mortgages dispersed by 29.9%. The estimated expansion in the other construction component was due to increased capital expenditure on civil engineering activities led by the National Works Agency, which dispersed $7.1 billion, up 144.4%, reflecting increased expenditure associated with disbursements on the Yallas to Harborview leg of the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP. NROC, which dispersed $3.1 billion relative to $148.5 million. Expenditure facilitated works on the SCHIP Part A, that is the Maypen in Clarendon to the Williams Field in Manchester component. Jamaica Public Service Company, which dispersed $2.2 billion, representing an increase of 25.4%. Expenditure was associated with installation activities to facilitate the increased distribution and generation of power. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 14%, reflecting higher real value added for all industries, with the exception of government services, which remained flat. Electricity and water supply. Electricity and water supply recorded estimated growth of 4% in real value added, reflecting expansion in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption increased by 4.3%, reflecting higher levels of consumption in 4 of the 6 categories. General service, that small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, was up 5.3%. Power service, large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, was up 6.6%. Large power, businesses using more than 500 kVA, was up 19.1%. And largest power, a single location that have a minimum peak demand of 2000 kVA, was up 38%. These outweighed estimated contractions in residential consumption, down 4.7%, and street lighting plus other, down 7.8%. The contraction in residential consumption is partly attributed to the relaxation of COVID-19 restrictions, which has facilitated more in-office work. 8 of the 14 parishes recorded higher sales, with Westmoreland recording the largest increase, 32.1%, followed by Hanover, 27.9%, and St. James, 20.7%. These increases are partially attributed to increased economic activities, especially within parishes that benefited from higher tourist arrivals. Water consumption grew by 2.9% due to increases in both the Western Division of 3.6% and the Eastern Division of 2.6%. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for the transport, storage, and communication industry grew by an estimated 16.5%. This resulted from growth in both the transport and storage and communications components. The performance was supported by the relaxation of COVID-19 containment measures and was driven by growth in air transport subcomponent, largely reflecting increased passenger movements of 842,069, up from 38,408. Departures increased to 430,141 from 22,417, and arrivals increased to 410,798, up from 15,530 persons. Maritime transport subcomponent, due to an estimated 16.6% growth in cargo handled at the heavier weighted Port of Kingston. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 2.5% during the review quarter. The performance reflected the impact of the relaxation of measures implemented to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and resulted in an increase in the net interest income on the stock of loans at deposit-taking institutions and an increase in fees and commissions income. WR trim. Real value added in the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry, is estimated to have grown by 13.2%, reflecting the combined impact of estimated growth in associated industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, and construction, and the relaxation of measures associated with the management of the COVID-19 pandemic, which extended operational hours and the reduced restriction on the movement of people. Higher sales were recorded for all 8 categories, including minerals, fuels, and lubricants, up 23.4%, agriculture, food, beverages, and tobacco, up 14.3%, hardware, building supplies, electrical goods, and machinery, up 44.6%, and other wholesale and retail sale of goods and services in specialized and non-specialized stores, up 36.9%. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry grew by an estimated 330.7%, reflecting a sharp increase in visitor arrivals following the closure of the island's borders to passenger movements for most of the corresponding quarter of 2020. Stopover arrivals for April to May 2021 increased to 205,244 visitors, compared with none during the corresponding period of 2020. Data on stopover arrivals for the month of June 2021 is not available at this time. For the employment update, recall that no labor market survey was undertaken in April 2020 due to the measures implemented then to manage the spread of COVID-19. As such, comparisons will be made with the pre-COVID April 2019 survey and the current April 2021 survey. The highlights are as follows. The unemployment rate was 9% for April 2021. This was 1.2 percentage points higher than the rate recorded in April 2019. The youth unemployment rate was 24% compared with 19.4%. The employed labor force declined by 40,500 persons to 1,206,000 persons relative to April 2019. The employed labor force by industry group, as at April 2021, revealed 8 of the 16 industry groups recorded lower employment levels. Among these were arts, entertainment, recreation, and other services, down 22,100 persons, accommodation and food service activities, hotels and restaurant services, down 20,500 persons, and transport and storage, down 12,900 persons. It is important to note that employment levels have increased since July 2020 as the economy gradually reopens. While not comparable because of seasonality factors, the data revealed that employment levels fell by 151,100 persons in July 2020 when compared with January 2020, Jamaica's pre-COVID-19 employment high. As at April 2021, more than half the employment lost during initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic have been regained. That is, 84,400 persons have gained employment since July 2020. For GDP performance for January to June 2021. For the first 6 months of 2021, real GDP is estimated to have grown by 2.3%. The goods producing industry is estimated to have increased by 5% and the services industry by 1.4%. The industries which were estimated to have recorded the largest increases during the first half of the year were construction, up 13.8%, agriculture, up 3.9%, other services, up 3.6%, and transport, storage, and communication, up 3.4%. For the short-term outlook, July to September 2021 and fiscal year 2021-2022. Prospects for the overall economy in the short term are positive, based on, 1, the continued economic recovery in most industries following the relaxation of some of the COVID-19 containment measures implemented in 2020. 2, gradual recovery of the global economy, which augurs well for external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. And 3, continued recovery in the levels of employment, as well as a strengthening in business confidence, which are expected to support domestic demand. This positive outlook, however, could be adversely impacted by 1, adverse weather conditions with the commencement of the hurricane season, 2, downturn in the mining and quarrying industry due to the fire at the Jamalco refinery, which caused damage to the powerhouse. 3, plant downtime due to relatively aged equipment in major industries. And 4, the spread of the new variants of the COVID-19 virus to the domestic economy, resulting in the loss of productive time as stricter COVID-19 controls are enacted to combat these new waves of infection. Against this background, for July to September 2021, growth in output is anticipated to be within the range of 4% to 6%. This projection is based on expected growth in most industries, led by the services industry, in particular hotels and restaurants, other services, and transport and storage and communication. Early indicators are positive, as reflected in hotels and restaurants, with a sharp increase in preliminary airport arrivals, up by 304.8% to 169,782 persons for the month of July. There were no cruise passenger arrivals during July. Other services, reflecting the anticipated increase in visitor arrivals. Electricity and water, reflecting increases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption for the month of July 2021 increased by 4.3% and water consumption by 2.9%. Mining and quarrying is the only industry expected to contract during the period, largely reflecting plant downtime associated with damage caused by fire at the Jamalco alumina refinery. The timing of the period for recovery in this industry remains uncertain, as the necessary assessments of the damage are ongoing. For the month of July, alumina production decreased by 17.4% and crude bauxite production contracted by 14.2%. It is anticipated that for all quarters of fiscal year 2021-22, the country will record higher levels of output relative to the subdued performance for fiscal year 2020-21 due to the restrictions caused by COVID-19. Consequently, the PIOJ's projection is for growth in output within the range of 6% to 10% for the full fiscal year. It should be noted, however, that the economy is not expected to attain pre-COVID GDP levels until fiscal year 2023-24. Pre-COVID employment levels should be attained in fiscal year 2022-23. In closing, the preliminary data presented on performance for the April to June 2021 quarter indicate that the economy has begun to show signs of economic recovery following the devastation caused by COVID-19 in fiscal year 2020-21. It should be noted, however, that the adverse impact of COVID-19 on economic activities is likely to be present for the medium term, given the emergence of new variants and challenges in attaining herd immunity. The robust growth outturn recorded during the review quarter largely reflected the partial recovery from the relatively low base in the corresponding period. It is anticipated that this growth momentum will provide a fillip to the economy in driving more robust growth in the medium term, that is post-recovery. This is based on the simultaneous and ongoing build-out of capacity, which is currently being undertaken in some industries, for example, BPOs, hotels, manufacturing, and so on, as well as for the public infrastructure nationally, that is improved road and drainage network, irrigation systems, cold storage facilities, hospitals, housing, and so on, as indicated by the performance of the construction industry. For the short term, it is anticipated that the economy will continue to record strong growth performance as most industries continue to recover. For July to September 2021, growth within the range of 4% to 6% is projected. For the fiscal year 2021-22, the forecast is for growth within the range of 6% to 10%. The recent implementation of no movement days will temper some economic activities, but given its relatively short duration, the negative impact on the economy is not expected to be significant. Given current developments with a third wave of COVID-19 infection, the expectation is that more stringent measures to limit its spread may be required by the authorities. The challenge is, therefore, how to effectively manage the spread of the virus amidst facilitating the enabling environment for growth. In light of this, the projections outlined above remain very fluid and are contingent on our collective efforts in managing the spread of the virus. Finally, I want to recognize a very dedicated and hardworking team here at the PIOJ. I encourage us all to maintain the discipline in protecting ourselves and our families by abiding by the protocols implemented to mitigate the spread of the pandemic. I also remind us all to continue to work together as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Director General. And at this time, we're going to welcome, we've reached a stage of the agenda where we will be opening up for discussions. So we have a protocol that we like to follow, which is that if you do wish to ask a question or to raise a point, put it in the chat and the chairman will acknowledge you, and then you will be able to go ahead and open your mic and speak. So the notes are in the chat again, and everything that was presented here, as usual, at the end of this event, it will be posted on the PIOJ website under news, which is pioj.gov.jm, and will be dispatched to our media partners. So we'll ask anyone who has a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. We're also monitoring Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn. And if you have any of the CUG numbers for our communications unit, you can also send it directly there. Thank you. Over to our chairman. Well, it doesn't seem that we have any questions today from our media partners, sir, or Mr. Stewart. We don't seem to have any of our media partners asking any questions on any of our platforms right now. Our chairman is just adjusting her microphone settings. She wants to place a chat. I'm asking for a couple seconds for our chairman just to quietly adjust her microphone settings, and she'll be coming right in. Adjusting her she wants to place a chat. I'm asking for a couple seconds.
I'm here now, Gwyneth. I'm here.
Yes, Mrs. Blake Hall, do go ahead with your point that you wanted to make to open the discussion.
DG, a quick question for someone. they're asking you to again look back at what you said about the lockdown, the recent lockdown, how it will affect the projected growth. Are there any numbers that will come up?
All right, thank you for that. So we're saying it is still uncertain. We said for in terms of the recent implementation of no movement days will temper some economic activities, but given its relatively short duration, the negative impact on the economy is not expected to be significant. But then given the current developments of the third wave of the COVID-19 infection, the expectation is that you could have more stringent measures to limit the spread could be required. And if that happens, then therefore that would effectively further curtail. But then still a lot of uncertainty abounds. This is a very uncertain time of uncertainty because of what we are seeing now. And it's contingent on human behavior. And so that's why we continue to make the appeal. We join in making that appeal that we act responsibly, because the outturn and outcome in terms of the pandemic itself is contingent on our behavior and response.
AG.
Mrs. Blake Hall, do you have, yes, we do have one question coming from Nationwide. I will go ahead and read out the question since it has been typed into the chat, and there's no indication that he'd like to speak. Dr. Henry, Mr. Stewart, the UK is expected to restrict travel to Jamaica, which might have an impact on tourism out of that country. What impact would this have on the PIOJ projections?
Go ahead.
You're hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you, sir.
Okay. Right. So currently, it will not impact our current projection. Arrivals from the UK have not restarted, and as such, we have not factored it in our projection, short-term projection for July to September.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Mr. Campbell? We're having a very quiet morning. Oh, I'm sorry, couldn't. Okay, the question coming up in the chat is one of hearing, and I think we're having various technical challenges. So we're going to be we'll assure our listeners that we'll be putting out the audio and the video in another hour or so that you can listen back carefully. I don't have any further questions coming in, so I'm handing back over to the PIOJ chairperson to close the meeting. The question coming up in the chat is one of hearing. I think we're having various technical challenges.
Must go ahead now. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Today's presentations will be uploaded to our website and social media pages. Please note that the ASSJ 2020 is now available and can be accessed from the PIOJ's website. Join us again in November when we will present on the performance of the July to September period. Have a good day. Remember, wash your hands, wear a mask, keep social distance, and get vaccinated. Have a good day, all.